Well, you know what time it is. It's my favorite time of day. It's time for the Astro Weather. What's happening, everybody? We're getting chilly. If you're not in Los Angeles, the rest of the country is starting to get a bit chilly right now. That's really not my background, but it'd be nice though if I could. I love snow, especially real snow. This fake bullshit geoengineered snow. I don't have a lot of love for. But growing up in an area, see, I grew up in California where snow was uncommon, and I know there are a lot of you who grew up in places where snow probably was all too common. And after a few months, you were like, "Okay, snow. We're over snow. We're over this. Just get me to some warm fucking place." Okay. But living in California, we never really had that. So when there was snow, it was a really big deal. And so the inner child, my inner child, loves snow because I was snow deprived as an inner child. I'm still waiting for the ultimate snowball fight and the ultimate snowman. And it might snow here today, but then again, it might not. But it is cold. What's happening, everybody? I hope you're all doing swell. Yes, it is Thursday already. Let's throw CJ's comment up there. It is Thursday already. Speaking of snow, it's melting in Jackie's neighborhood. Maybe the drones helped out. If the drones had snow heaters, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Snow heating drones? Or what about drones that would bring you snow cones? The little arm would stick out of the drone and there'd be a snow cone waiting. Here you go. Here's a snow cone. Here's a nanobot infested snow cone for you. Which flavor would you like? My man Michael's here. Deborah Wheeler's here. Well, Deborah, you're a pleasure to have in chat. It's 37 degrees in Apple Valley. I guess Brandy is in Sin City right now. Let's see who else we have here. Janine. Hi, Janine. Great to see you. Our hardy Sagittarian. Scott Jersey's here. Hi, Scott. Barbara's back. Recovering from that long trip from Asia. Yes, Barbara was doing covert work for the American government in Asia. If you've ever met Barbara, and some of you did, you would never realize that she's a spy. It's perfect. She's got the perfect like demeanor and sort of presence of somebody extremely normal. But she speaks about 5 different languages, and she's a complete spy. But don't tell anybody. Susie G's here. Hi, Susie G. Misbehaving 2. Whatever happened to misbehaving 1? Liddy Lou. It's going to be snowing in McKinney. Hey, they had a big substation outage in Fort Worth last night. I don't know if you saw that. That sucker exploded. Sue Leonard's here. Hi, Sue, from down under. Maya Rose from Amera, Mexico. Recovering from weird cough, throat, runny nose. Good. We're glad you're back on the mend. Who else do we have? I miss Nikki. Hearts out to Miss Nikki. George Roby, rise and shine. That's right. Greetings, George. Man, Neil Smith is in the house. Oh, look who's here. It's little Miss So-and-so. It's little Miss So-and-so. Yes, it's your time of day, isn't it? Yes, it is. Let's see. Laura E's in the house. Balmy in the snow globe, 9 degrees. Yikes. It's chilly. Gillian Hart Rosie. It's very cold in Middle Tennessee, says Susan. Athena, brr, brr. There she is, the lovely and talented one, saving Austin one tooth at a time. Uh, Trouble on the stream. I'm using the mesh network today. What's happening, Vivi? Oh, Southern California. What a nightmare. What an absolute nightmare. Soul Travelers here. Big Dave Sullivan, Lynette Jardine, Mad Maxine. Janice Phillips checking in from Oklahoma, where the wind comes whipping down the plain. My man, Steve, Thor at the door. What's going on, brother? Jill Wong checking in from Mexico. Shirley Lochavo from Central Virginia, a little 15 degrees. My man, Steve, Zerolith Immortal. This is a very interesting comment here. There's a message being sent to Hollywood. You know, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Artists here, it's time to get this day moving. It's Jupiter Day. That's right. It is Thor's Day. Kelly B had a work meeting. Next time you're at a work meeting, just patch us in. Patch us in. Let's be a part of your work meeting. Maybe we can help solve some problems or create more. My man Ryan's here. What's going on, Ryan? That's right. It is chilly except in Los Angeles. You got that right. Darlene is in the house. Darlene. Sandra Wells, 5 degrees in central Indiana. The rest of the country is in kind of a deep freeze mode, except for LA, which is the third rung of hell right now. Yeah, we'll be doing a major presentation. I'll be doing a major presentation over in Locals on Saturday. I'll be hooking that up today. So this is going to be the 2025 forecast. So all you Locals fans, you're clamoring for content. It's coming at you in a big chunk. Cassandra Lynn, another beautiful day in the neighborhood. God bless. Let's see. No snow in Southeast Alaska. Well, geez. You would think that would be the case. Don't forget that like and subscribe. That's always an important part of the show. Kip, it's 4 degrees here in Michigan and no snow. Ooh, so you get the freezing temperature, but you don't get the snow globe. Wow. Kelly B, living in the country during blizzard of 93 killed my inner child's love of snow. An entire week of no heat or water without a ton of work. No, thank you. Yeah, see, I was just a California kid. I was snow deprived. Jen Adams from Brooklyn is here. Hi, Jen. Josie's Jazzy Junk. A new and improved Mr. Softy. Lamb Chop 641. Hey, back. Debbie Sue's here. She's got her computer back up and working. Lena Winkler. Hello. Jinx, you guys owe each other a Coke. There you go. They back to back on the members' part. Hey, we got a Meredith Lucky Star sighting. What's happening, Meredith? Good to see you. Lisa Ann White, the law's in the house. Are we almost caught up? Barbara is awesome. Devin Dewar, man, the astrologers are showing up today. Look at that. Hi, Devin. Good to see you. Sun Sue is here too. Still light. Hello. Mindy Beth, man, we got a good crew here today. Still light is in Thailand. We got Thailand checking in. We are global. The Barbara Spy Hartley. in Japan. Spent a couple days in the hot springs bath near Narita. Did you bathe with those monkeys? I've always wanted to bathe with those monkeys. That's another part of my deprived childhood. I always wanted a monkey. And I know they're a hassle, but still, nonetheless. All right, why don't we get going? Just a shout out from yesterday, Moonsprout. Belated happy birthday to Moonsprout. I didn't mean to miss you, but sometimes I just get going and I don't always check back with the chat. And that's on me. That's on me. My bad. All right. Enough with the conviviality. Let's talk about the weather, the Astro Weather. Is that today? That's yesterday. That's not going to work for us. It is not going to work. Let's see. Where's today? I know I mapped out today. What's this? Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. I know I had it in here somewhere. I know I did that thing last night. I just gotta find it. Hold on. Maybe I didn't do it. Let's see. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. Thank you for your patience. All right, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. Is that right? Is that going to be right? That can't be right. No, it's not right. This is right. There we go. Perfection. Perfection. All right. So today I'm going to challenge myself. I am going to challenge myself. All right. Yes. Yes. Okay. You know, it's interesting. Every now and then, Astro.com, which I use and I actually really enjoy. Every now and then I will get these charts where the lines are much more delineated, like today. So maybe for some of you folks, the delineated lines might look a little clearer on the screen. So here we go. The Astro Weather in 3, 2, 1. All right, here's our Mercury. We talked about that yesterday, and that's at 1 degree. And it is still in that inconjunct mode with Mars, because Mars is moving backwards and Mercury's moving forwards, right? So we're continuing to have this inconjunct. It's a tricky inconjunct. Why? Because Mars in Cancer is generally not confrontational. And when it's in retrograde motion, it's even less confrontational. Think of the crab retreating and going back into its crab hole, right? Like in the side of the, one of the things in my course, I have an astrological course, which is available for purchase. One of the things that I talk about with the sign of Cancer is this ability to attach. It's a sign that gets very attached and doesn't like to let go of things, right? It's got those claws. and that crab can get on the side of a rock face, right? And they can just have the ocean pound the shit out of it, and kind of find a crevice and lock in and become part of the landscape, right? Like that is the one of the superpowers of the crab. Like it's just going to be tenacious and just not let go until it does, and maybe it's on a high tide, and then the high tide, takes the crab away, floats downstream or down current, and winds up in its next little crabby location. So when we have Mars retrograde, it's really accentuating that lock it in moment. Cancer is like local water, right? It's like local water. When we talk about the various, I've brought this up before, but if you're new and maybe it's a refresher course for you, the different water signs represent different bodies of water. So with Cancer, you have things like wells. You have the water that comes into your home, right? You have municipal water, wells, municipal water, ponds, not huge ponds, but medium-sized ponds, streams, and creeks, right? Creeks. Those are your and some aquifer action. Like that's Cancerian water, right? The scorpionic water is going to be, raging rivers, big rivers like the Nile or the Amazon, usually taking you into some foreboding territory, right? The heart of darkness, scorpionic water, or very deep and mysterious lakes. That's scorpionic water. And then when we get to Pisces, we're into oceanic water, right? All tributaries lead into Pisces in the 12th house. The reason I'm bringing this up is let's take a look at Los Angeles. There's no water. Hello, Mars retrograde in Cancer. There is no water, right? So there's a lot of reasons why there's no water. It's not just one reason. And so here we have this Mercury in Capricorn, which theoretically should be the top-down command. It's like, open the faucets, or open the fire hydrants, but there's nothing there, right? There's nothing that they can tap unless you're around the Getty, in which case there was water, and they did wind up saving the Getty, right? And we also have this Mars retrograde squaring Chiron in Aries, and this whole thing started when the moon was in Aries conjuncting Chiron. And Aries is about fire. So we can, from an astrological perspective, I guess you could blame it on Mars retrograde, but it has that effect, right? Like Mars direct is like, hey, the water's here. We got plenty of water. And in actuality, there probably is plenty of water because Mars is in trine with Neptune. It's just that it's not getting to where it needs to be. It's probably been rerouted somewhere, right? So this Mercury in conjunct with Aries goes even beyond that. This Mercury in conjunct with Aries, I think, has a lot to do with being able to articulate some degree of anger. And anger is not forthcoming but I'm telling you, there's going to be a period here with this Mars retrograde where, okay, I'll tell you a story and then I'm going to link it back to this Mars retrograde. So there's this woman who was a, what do they call it? There's I'm sorry, it's still a little early. It's when commutes are at their peak and there is an extra charge for your car I think it's called peak pricing or something like that. And it was just instituted in New York. So if you were driving your car from, let's say, New York to New Jersey, let's say you had I don't know, some kind of desk job in New Jersey. You work for a utility company or something, but you were living in New York, and you would drive your car to New Jersey. Normally, let's say the toll, because you got to cross bridges to go to New Jersey. Let's say the toll is, I don't know, $9. It's called peak pricing, I think, peak pricing or congestion price, something like that. And if you make that trip now, let's say it's a $9 toll from 6 to 9, right, or 5 to 9 or whatever it is, that becomes $20. And when you come home at night, it's $20. So instead of costing you $18 plus gas to get to where you're going, it's now $40 plus gas. And you do this 5 days a week. Now, there's this woman, she sued the state of New York and Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul probably liked it. And she sued them to get this thing put into place. Right. So there's a person attached to this major inconvenience, forcing people to go on the subways, to go on the buses. And she was, I guess people recognize her, very public figure, hardcore advocate for this. And she was on the subway and she got beaten up. She got roughed up. So I'm going to say something a little controversial here. People in positions of power and authority, and she would fall into the category of a petty tyrant. No matter how well-meaning she is, no matter how driven by the ghosts of climate change, right, are haunting her, she's a petty tyrant. And people who are like that, they're bullies, right? They're going to assert their worldview and their opinion onto other people forcefully. And this has been happening for a while. And they've been doing it with just absolute comfort, right? With no threat of reprisal or any sort of backlash. Right? And in fact, they've been kind of this protected class if they have the sort of right ideology or the right platform. That's coming to an end. Now, we had Giuseppe Mangione. Whatever you think about what happened, who he is, blah, blah, blah. On the surface, that is a symbol for what I'm talking about. Now, I am not advocating violence, but people who have thrust themselves into the change agent role and business have been doing it with a sense of entitlement for a long time. I think people are going to put their foot down. Here, I'll give you an example, right? Because there are social examples that are not socially acceptable, and you would get a whiplash or a backlash quickly. Let's say you wanted to start a local Klan chapter in your town, or you wanted to bring a resolution to the city council that you wanted to start a Hitler Memorial Museum. Right? There'd be backlash because it's a consensually agreed upon fact that those things are not acceptable, right? These other things that I'm talking about have been, for the most part, consensually agreed to be acceptable. However, that's changing. That's changing. So we're going to see more of this. We're going to see, and I'm going to be perfectly frank. I don't think it's a bad idea or a bad thing, right? If you are somebody who has the gall to insist that other people live by a credo or an ideology that you espouse, and it affects their lives in ways that makes them a hell of a lot more complicated and uncomfortable, but for whatever reason, smooths your ruffled ideological feathers, you deserve to have some very blunt criticism and even interaction with other people, right? This is, I just, look, we live in a society where all the edges have been smoothed. There are cultures, and you can say, well, this is the rule of law. This is what makes America great. People have capitalized on the rule of law, and they've capitalized on our compassion and our empathy, and all of those things have been weaponized against the majority of the people. And so the majority of the people have to sit back and pardon my language here, just take it up the ass, because one or two people in some special interest group, like for instance in California, getting back to this Mars retrograde and Mercury in conjunct. Well, you have some special interest groups, quote unquote, native people, which I have nothing against, right? I've done sweat lodges. I've hung out with that community, like good people, but they decided that they wanted to have some fish run free or fish swim free, and Gavin Newsom started to take these dams down. You take the dams down, what happens? You're losing more water, right? California's management of water has been horrible, and yet it's the small protected group and class. Maybe they're hired. Who knows what the arrangement is, right? But their small little footprint is forcing everybody else to go through what's happening in Los Angeles now. And I think people's patience has abated around this. Like people have reached the end of their fuse. And so this woman in get a message from Narco Longo. This woman in New York, she's a symbol of that. If you go into countries that don't have the quote unquote rule of law like the United States, and you try to do something that is going to harm the community in some ways, well, you better keep your head on a swivel, because there are people in that country that may decide to take matters into their own hands and say, fuck you, we don't like this, right? We don't like it. And we're going to let you know that we don't like it. Again, I'm not advocating people go out and, take matters into their own hands, but I'm going to tell you the energy is there. And this Mars retrograde is it is a boiler, right? It is a freaking boiler, and it's going backwards. And you're good. This is the effect, right? People are going to lose their shit, because they're going to see the effects of all these decisions that have been made by little petty tyrants like Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. We're going to get into her in 15 minutes. And the anger and the frustration is going to boil and boil and boil and boil and boil. And when this Mars goes direct in Cancer, you're going to see people take things into their own hands. And it is not going to be pretty, because we have seen how the court system works. We have seen how this so-called, justice works. Right now, this true node is going to move into Pisces. And what do we know about Pisces? Right, we know Pisces is connected to sacrifice, scapegoats, sacrificial lambs. Oh, we'll have sacrificial lambs on a spit with this true node in Pisces. Like the whole idea of, well, let's just forgive them. Let's just forgive Karen Bass. She can't help it that she was raised as a Marxist. She can't help that every step of the way she's been promoted and rewarded for her fervent Marxist ideology. Let's just forgive her. She's one of God's children. That's not going to work. Not now. You see, this is what's happening with this Mars Chiron square. Excuse me. People are hot. It may be 4 or 5 degrees somewhere in the country, but I guarantee you people are hot. And then you got Donald Trump. This whole thing with Greenland and Canada, it's like Southern California is burning. You've got Governor Nero playing his fiddle there, and Trump's talking about Greenland, and he's talking about the Gulf of America. It's a little tone deaf. And you notice that Mr. I've got answers to everything, Elon Musk, pretty mom. Where's your technological solution to all the fires, Tony Stark? So we're in a boiling point moment, and it's going to continue to boil with this Mars retrograde, and this in conjunct with Mercury. It's kind of like, well, who do we talk to? Who's going to take whose attention do we need to get? How do we articulate this? It's not easy. Are there some good things today? Sure, there's some good things today. There's always something that can be considered good. Mars retrograde coming in, trining Neptune. I always feel like we live in a world where creativity and art is really degraded. When I see degraded, I mean, not that, yes, it is degraded because there's shitty, degrading art, but people used to aspire towards greatness when it came to painting something, right? Like if you were painting in the realism style, you would like figure out, well, how do I get this shadow here? And how do I get this to look, sort of correct with the perspective, right? And how do I create a sense of light with paint hitting, these leaves and not have it be uniform, right? And so you would have like people like, John Ruskin, great realist kind of painter. And you would look at these things and, my God, this is incredible. It almost looks like a photograph. Well, maybe it was a photograph, but people used to aspire towards that, right? And we live in a society now where the greatest aspiration is to be a tech bro. And I'm not here to slam, like if you have a kid who's an avid video gamer and they're really good at it, I'm not here to slam them, right? But that's aspirational. That passes for aspirational now in our society. So this Mars retrograde trining Neptune, and I threw this out on Twitter the other day, and I just said, this is not art. And it had nothing to do with anything. It had mostly to do with the level of discourse and the kind of postmodern pastiche. And Twitter is an art form in some ways. I'm not going to deny that. But it's not art. It may be an art form, but it's not art. And so with this Mars retrograde coming in and trining Neptune, if you have creative chops and creative juices, this is a really good time to get back in touch with them. Right? It's like, I used to do this. I used to play the guitar, or I used to sing, or I used to dabble in watercolors. And now all I do is spend half my time on the internet looking at YouTube videos to try to stay up to date and decode the matrix. Right? So this Mars retrograde is good in that regard. And so if you're one of those people who have that skill set, go for it. Right? Like, pull it out of the closet, because it's also a way to deal with the attendant frustration and emotion that is deeply unresolved at this time. We got a Moon Uranus conjunction today. That's kind of spicy, right? Moon Uranus conjunction. Emotional connections happening. And it's, the good thing about it, like, especially like right now, is that it's kind of, operating without any kind of deflection, right? Moon Uranus trining the sun, Moon Uranus sextiling Mars, Moon Uranus sextiling Neptune. To me, that's representing breaking out of emotional patterns. Today's an easy way to do that, right? If the freeway is blocked, get off the fucking freeway. Get on the frontage road. Go do something else. Right? Today is take the alternative route day. Allow yourself emotionally to say, hey, fuck it. I am not going to do the same thing that I did yesterday. I'm going to map out new emotional terrain. And you may say, well, this is just kind of like a little fancy here that we're going to be indulging in. Not really, because this is fixed, right? This is all fixed with Taurus. So the things that you do today in terms of breaking out of emotional habituation and patterns, first of all, they're easy. All you got to do is say yes to it. Secondly, you can put something in motion today that can have long-term effect. Why? It's trining the sun, and it's trining good old, whatchamacallit. Oh man, I'm having a Palace in Capricorn, right? And Capricorn's all about the long term, right? It's about the long haul. So there is some brightness, right? And today's a day where you can access that. So remember that. All right, enough of my tirade. Let's get into our star of the day. Now, I was told that I did this last year. And maybe I did, but if I did, well, it's worth doing again. Those are some red eyes. I don't have conjunctivitis. I took a shower. And when I take a shower in the morning, my eyes get red. But thank you, Janice. I appreciate that. Let's see. Let's do the banner. All right. So today's True Hemp Science star of the day is none other than Jimmy Page. You know what's interesting about today? Jimmy Page and Rasputin share the same birthday. There's something very poetic about that. It's also Richard Nixon's birthday. 3 infamous plaster casters. Jimmy Page has a fascinating chart. Really fascinating chart. Before I talk about it, let's talk about True Hemp Science, your one-stop shop for all things CBD. And when you spend $100 or more, you type in 15MINS. You get the goodie package. The goodie package, which is a blessing on top of your order. And when you go to the website, you'll find all these wonderful concoctions, Solera, Synapta, and they're all designed for a certain effect, right? And the thing you want to do with CBD is you want to do it consistently, right? You want to soak your cells, right? You want to soak your cells and your neurons in this stuff. I'm going to take some right now, so that your body becomes sort of lubricated, right, on a daily basis. It helps with a lot of different things, and it can be very, very beneficial for things like your mood. Okay, just saying. And all you got to do is type in that 15MINS, spend $100. You get the goodie bag, and you're off and running. $150 more, get you free shipping. There's always a 30-day money back guarantee. Remember, Chris was named the best CBD purveyor in Austin in 2024. All right, let's talk about Jimmy Page. So one of the things that, and again, stop me if you've heard this one, but don't, because I'm going to keep going anyway. One of the things that I found interesting about Page's chart is that he has Pluto and the True Node and Jupiter all in the 9th house. And Led Zeppelin became bigger in the United States than they were in England. Right? Like Peter Grant, their manager, said, we're going to conquer America. And Peter Grant was a hardcore manager, right? Like he made sure that he got every single little cent out of anybody that he dealt with. If you haven't seen The Song Remains the Same, there's a very interesting scene with Peter Grant, the manager of Led Zeppelin, talking to a promoter and raking him over the grills, right, to make sure that Led Zeppelin got everything due to them. So they conquered America. They were bigger in America at one point than they were. Of course, they became big in England. But they're kind of like the reverse story of Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix got big in England before he was big in America. Led Zeppelin was big in America before they became really big in England. And that's all 9th house stuff, right? All 9th house. And Jimmy Page is a pretty creative guy. He's got Jupiter and Leo. It's conjunct his midheaven. His midheaven is at 0 Virgo. So he's meticulous, right? He is meticulous. You know, just kind of nerdy attention to detail. And when Jimmy Page started out, he was a session musician in England. And so he was a copycat, right? Like they said, hey, can you do a Dwayne Eddy lick? Sure, no problem. I can do a Dwayne Eddy lick. Can you do an Eddie Cochran lick? Yeah, no problem. I can do Eddie Cochran. Right? So he was a copycat, and it was his job to mimic other artists. And he was quite young, right? And so he made money being a hired gun in the studio. That is very second housey, right? Like he's going to make money. Capricorn. And the thing about Jimmy Page, which is really fascinating, is like you get these guys, oh, I'm too good to be a session musician. I'm wasting away here. I'm wasting. And sometimes it'd be very temperamental, but you'd have to work with him. Jimmy Page never did that. Jimmy Page was like, yeah, give me more, give me more, give me more. Like he was very pleasant to deal with and made sure he got a lot of work. So he made, good money and like saved it up like a good Capricorn would and waited for his time. And his time was when he joined the Yardbirds. And it's interesting because he has Neptune in the 11th house, which represents groups, right? Like groups like the Yardbirds or groups like Led Zeppelin. It's groups. 11th house is groups. And he gets into the Yardbirds kind of towards the end. I think there's a bit of an overlap with him and Beck. Like Clapton's there first and Clapton leaves. Beck comes in. And then there's a bit of an overlap with Beck and Page, and then Beck leaves. And by the way, Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck were childhood friends. Like they hung out with each other. They went to record stores with each other. Very, very interesting story with those guys. But he gets into the Yardbirds sort of at the end. And in typical Jimmy Page fashion, he sort of like takes control. And he's going to create, because they had tour dates set up, right? And he's like, well, geez, who was the singer at that time? Was it Keith Ralph? I forget. But like the band was kind of breaking up, but he didn't want to miss out on the tour dates. So he connects with his buddy from the session days, John Paul Jones, whom he knew quite well because John Paul Jones was doing the same thing. So, well, let's go start a band. And they wind up connecting with Robert Plant and John Bonham, who were from the Midlands, because they'd heard about him. And they were going to call the band the New Yardbirds, but that didn't quite work out. So eventually they settled on the name Led Zeppelin. But it's that Neptune in the 11th house, which was so kind of fluid, right? Like, okay, well, we're the Yardbirds. We're the New Yardbirds. I'm taking over the Yardbirds. And we're Led Zeppelin, right? And Page has, he's got that kind of cap. He's quiet. If you look at his Mercury, like if you go down here, his Mercury is almost a singleton. You have like a minor aspect here, and his Mercury is behind us, barely behind his sun. Cazimi, he's got the Sun Mercury Cazimi. And he doesn't. Jimmy Page is not somebody who's like noteworthy in interviews. He doesn't say a lot, right? He just does not. He doesn't talk a lot. Never talked on stage. Robert Plant did all that, right? But he was always thinking. He was always planning. He was always kind of plotting his next move, right? He was very good at that, extremely good at that. And the other thing that's interesting about Page is this moon in Cancer, right? Okay, so he owned Aleister Crowley's old place, right? Aleister Crowley's place on Loch Ness. So the moon is the home. And in the 8th house, which is ruled by Scorpio, it's the occult. He lived in an occult home, right? With moon and Cancer in the 8th house. Also, emotionally, a lot going on in Jimmy Page's world, right? That we don't know about on an emotional level. He has a moon Neptune square. I would say that to me, that moon Neptune square is indicative of some inability to trust. And I'm not talking about trusting like Robert Plant or John Paul Jones or Peter Grant, but trust in a way where there's a risk of intimacy, right? Like that moon Neptune square is tricky. It's very tricky. And you can see all the Gemini going on over here, like Saturn in Gemini, Uranus in Gemini, Mars in Gemini, like Gemini. I think that allowed him to be a copycat with the music. And he's got this Mars-Uranus conjunction, which is also quite futuristic. And Led Zeppelin was doing things that other bands, he's got the theremin, and he's got the EBO, right? He's always trying to kind of, create new creative ground. He's got a very interesting chart. It's super top heavy, with the exception of Venus and Sun Mercury, right? So everything is all about kind of this aspiration. He's got a Mars-Venus opposition, and it's all squaring Chiron. I feel like in some ways Jimmy Page might have suffered from some sort of perfection anxiety. You know what I mean? Like trying to be like perfect with Chiron in Virgo, and you're never gonna hit that, right? And so Mars is squaring Chiron, and Venus is squaring Chiron, and I think that that need to be perfect could also be a real grinder. You know, it's fascinating that post Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page's career was really not that very special. You can make a case that Robert Plant's career was much better than Jimmy Page after Led Zeppelin. No, it's not because he didn't record; he did, right? The key ingredient for Jimmy Page is Robert Plant. Like Robert Plant is a late Leo, right? And that Jupiter is right at late Leo. So Robert Plant's sun is right on his Jupiter. You see that right there? And it's sextiling Saturn and Gemini. So the relationship with Plant is critical to Jimmy Page's success. Relationship-wise, he's got Venus and Sagittarius, first house. He's going to live with relationships on his own terms. And, with Mars, I can tell you another thing about Jimmy Page. He's fucking kinky. This Mars-Uranus conjunction, right? Uranus leaning into he's kinky. Jimmy Page behind the scenes has some very unusual turn-ons. Let's put it that way. And if you can't roll with that Venus-Mars opposition, you're out. You're out. And Venus and Sag just wants to be free. He wants to be able to love whoever he wants to love. Venus sextile Neptune, Venus trine Pluto. Right. It's also very, he's very feminine in a lot of ways. It's so funny when you look at Plant looks so masculine, except when he's wearing the clothes of the woman he bedded the night before. But when you listen to Plant talk, he has this very kind of fairy voice, Page is different, right? Page looks, in some ways, much more effeminate. But he doesn't talk like Robert Plant. He's very soft-spoken, but he doesn't have that wee kind of fairy voice that Robert Plant does. And he's a Scorpio rising. He's intense. He's very intense. So there you go. I would say that the one thing that he has had to deal with over the course of his life is that he was such a good copycat in terms of the session work that it kind of bled into plagiarism. And everybody steals from everybody else. And but Led Zeppelin has had this sort of stigma about them that, well, they took the Lemon song and that's a black blues song, and they popularized it, and they're kind of culturally exploiting them. It's like, really? Now, Stairway to Heaven, which is a song that he heard, I think, who did it? Jimmy Spheris, maybe? I think it might have been Jimmy Spheris. He heard him in a club in New York. He's like, I like that song. He kind of took it, right? And that's, to me, this is the South Node in Aquarius in the third house, like the kind of the Gemini part, the matching part. And I'll just change a few things up here. Happens all the time. You know what's interesting too about this day? Because if you look at Jimmy Page, what did he do? What did Led Zeppelin do? They conquered America, right? And then, they're in this whole kind of blues world, blues revival in England, and they're taking these blues forms. And now, and then these purists come along and say, well, you're appropriating this cultural art form. Do you know who else's birthday it is today? John Smith. John Smith, the guy who traveled to the United States on the Mayflower, probably the greatest colonialist of all time. Right up there with Christopher Columbus. And he's English. And what does John Smith do? He kind of conquers America. Right? He kind of conquers America. John Smith was a badass. Total bad. He was Very interesting character. Not only did he lead the expedition, he led the Mayflower, but he also knew how to do things like agronomy and farming. And he got all the fucking pilgrims to work their ass off and start growing shit. And then when the locals started to, not all the locals, but some of the locals started to get aggressive with him, what did John Smith do? He said, we're going to sneak into their camp and we're going to cut their fucking throats and we're going to take their heads off and we're going to put their heads on a pike while everybody else is sleeping. So when they wake up in the morning, they're going to see that their chief and their warriors are completely and utterly disemboweled, right? And decapitated. That's what John Smith did. And guess what? They never fucked with the pilgrims again. Well, we better bring them some food. They're hungry. They might chop our heads off. No, I mean, there's some truth to that, but it was just one tribe. The other tribes probably a little more meaningful relationship there. But it's interesting that John Smith kind of colonialized and in some ways had his footprint in conquering America, just in the same way that Jimmy Page would do centuries later, but through a completely different medium, art form, and intention. We can blame it all on the British. All right. I'm out of here. Right up to the top of the hour. Thanks for being here. Remember, if you're a locals person, we got our big webinar this weekend. And that's about it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Come join us over on 15. I'm going to get, we're going down the Karen Bass hole. We're going down the Bass hole. So join us over there and you'll find out some things about her that are quite interesting. All right. Take good care. Mods, thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe and treat each other well. Love you all. Bye for now.